In the news this week, we'll never rest on our laurels, Deputy Premier's reflection and hopes for 2021.
The cluster that stole Christmas in New South Wales, restrictions are back after a COVID cluster.
Matter of urgency, youth a high mental health priority as a new WA plan tackles the issue.
And on Western Perspective, part 3 of the Recap 2020 interview series with Health Minister Roger Cook.
This is the Evening News with Ivan Lowe and Sarah Smith.
Good evening. Deputy Premier Roger Cook has reflected on 2020 and shares hopes for 2021 in an exclusive interview with WAMN News. He says the government will rely on their records of achievements and policies ahead of the state election in March. Kit Sanders reports.
Roger Cook met with WAMN to reflect on the year that has been 2020, a year of COVID, economic uncertainty and fear for many Australians. While Western Australia has been one of the safest places in the world to be, Mr Cook says there is always more work to be done in the midst of a pandemic.
We never rest on our laurels when it comes to our response to COVID-19.
Cook spoke about the hard decisions the government has had to make to ensure WA's safety over the last year.
It's obviously the Premier and I were making decisions to close down whole industries. People were being put out of work. People had their livelihoods stolen by COVID-19. They were some really difficult decisions.
Cook sees getting young people back into the workforce as essential to WA's economic recovery, with additional training opportunities and apprenticeships being supported by the state government.
As Minister for Health, Mr Cook says his only hope is for a safe and happy 2021 for Australia and the successful distribution of the COVID vaccine.
My hope for 2021 is that it's happy and it's safe. We've obviously got a big task now of, once we've received the vaccine, getting that vaccine out to as many people as possible. This is a great milestone in terms of our fight around COVID-19, and we'll continue to try and make all those decisions which are in the interests of keeping Western Australians safe.
For the full interview, watch Western Perspective later in the program. Kit Sanders, WAMN News.
A COVID outbreak in New South Wales this week saw the state government react fast, restricting the entry of New South Wales travellers into WA and requiring thousands of people who have arrived into the state to get COVID tested.
Premier Mark McGowan has begged West Australians not to travel to New South Wales if they can at all avoid it. But WA's top doctor says big lines at testing clinics and a lack of PPE shows we're not prepared for an outbreak.
Premier Mark McGowan announced just after 5 p.m. Saturday evening that WA will effectively reinstate a hard border with New South Wales from midnight. After a second emergency management team meeting for the day, involving Mr McGowan, the Police Commissioner, the Acting Chief Health Officer, the Health Minister and other senior staff, they decided to change the border control arrangements in light of developments in New South Wales. The decision was based on the latest advice, and Mr McGowan stated he is extremely concerned that the size of the Sydney outbreak could mean New South Wales is on the verge of a serious outbreak.
It is clear New South Wales will record further cases in coming days. The situation is extremely concerning. The virus is circling throughout the Sydney community.
At 12:01 on Sunday the 20th of December, the rating of New South Wales changed from being a low-risk state to being a medium-risk state, the highest of any states. This will in effect reinstate a hard border with New South Wales, as travel into WA from New South Wales will no longer be permitted unless the traveller is exempt. The exemption list will be limited to certain senior government officials, certain active military personnel, a member of the Commonwealth Parliament, a person carrying out functions under a law of the Commonwealth, a person coming into WA at the request of the Chief Health Officer, a person responsible for transport, freight or logistics, and anyone who has been given approval by the State Emergency Coordinator or an authorised officer. This category includes compassionate reasons. The compassionate reasons category includes Western Australians who travelled to New South Wales recently and need to return to WA. These will be assessed on a case-by-case basis, and if permitted entry into WA, they will be required to self-quarantine for 14 days. Mr McGowan said that this has been a difficult decision to make, especially given the time of the year.
Our thoughts are with our friends and family in New South Wales during this very difficult and sad period. This is not what anyone wanted just days before Christmas. As my parents and brother live in New South Wales, I have a personal connection with what is happening over there. Obviously, I want my family in New South Wales to stay safe. We're all hoping New South Wales can get this under control as quickly as possible. Restrictions in the community are necessary to stop the spread and limit the impact of the virus.
He also urged the New South Wales government to do what is necessary to put a halt to community spread, not just for the sake of New South Wales, but for the whole country. Helene Fong, WAMN News.
Young people are now a high priority mental health concern, with the McGowan government plan now in place to face the youth mental health issues head on in WA. It's being considered a matter of urgency, with mental health issues affecting growing numbers of youths and presenting a high cost to the economy. Nelson Liu reports.
A matter of urgency for WA's youth, protecting their mental health for the future.
We want to make sure that we do better.
Action on youth mental health is on the way in a new plan to support young people. 40 immediate actions have been implemented, including expanding emergency response and a one-stop shop system.
We have to continue to invest and make sure that the investments that we make are strategic and effective.
It'll also be more culturally and linguistically inclusive.
There's such diversity within those called services that we actually need to achieve.
17% of 12 to 24-year-olds suffer from poor mental health, with demand for youth mental health services rising 15%. It follows a review into teenager Kate Savage's death, her family let down by WA's limited mental health system. Young people have welcomed the plan but want more support.
I lost my best friend to suicide earlier this year because I think the lack of mental health services came into play.
And the government says the time for action is now. Nelson Liu, WAMN News.
More than 100 police officers involved in the investigation into the shooting death of former rebel bikie boss Nick Martin have been banned from speaking publicly about the shooting to avoid compromising the case. Here's the latest news about the murder case as police worried about the full-scale bikie war, prompting a series of raids on bikie clubhouses across Perth. Ricky Chapman, who was wounded when Martin was shot and killed at the Kwinana Multiplex, was arrested on Thursday for breach of bail conditions. On the same day, Hells Angels bikie Dana Brakovic appeared in the Perth Magistrates Court for the brutal public beating of Martin 2 weeks before he was shot dead.
I think by choosing to be 1%, they understand that the 99% probably outweigh them in numbers. They would have expected this. We do have some images of weapons. None of the weapons are ones that we would say are linked to the actual offence that's being investigated, but we have seized a number of weapons this week.
More Western Australians are finding work on the state's infrastructure projects, with graduates from a job-ready course landing jobs. The government's Infrastructure Ready course have resulted in Western Australians working on major Metronet projects, with another 35 students enrolled in the course. It's expected the program will extend into regional WA next year, with the government claiming it's giving Western Australians opportunities. The graduates have been hired for roles across projects, including the Yanchep Rail Extension, Thornley to Coburn Link and the High Wycombe Station.
Our first cohort of 15 graduates have gone through. We have at least another 35 or so training as we speak, and there'll be more coming through who'll be able to join these important projects across the city.
Protesters have been arrested in Melbourne's suburb of Carlton this week after protesting the movement of 60 asylum seekers to a former COVID-19 quarantine hotel, where the protesters claim the refugees have the rights to access outdoors. The protesters assert they were peacefully protesting within their rights. Footage by whistleblowers, activists and Community Alliance shows multiple protesters being forcefully slammed to the ground and carted away from the scene of the protest. Demonstrators continued outside Park Hotel, with activists vowing to continue until everyone in the hotel is released.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison has announced several frontbench and assistant ministry changes, with big changes for 2 Western Australians. Former SAS soldier Andrew Hastie is now Assistant Minister for Defence. The Canning MP recently called for greater oversight of the military, following war crimes investigations into Australian soldiers. Tangney MP Ben Morton, often referred to as the Prime Minister's right-hand man, will take on the role of Assistant Minister in electoral matters, with Health Minister Greg Hunt taking the aged care portfolio.
Dolly Parton is well known for her music, but less so for her literacy initiative, Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. In WA, a non-for-profit called United Way is the Imagination Library's WA partner, and this year they are raising money to give families in Merriwa and Clarkson the books they'll need to teach their kids to read. United Way WA is raising money to give 20 at-risk children the best start at life and literacy with one free age-appropriate book per month.
We're finding that a child's ability to read and write occurs from 0 to 5. So if they're not ready for school, they're going to fall behind, and that's going to follow them to adulthood.
If you'd like to donate, head to unitedwaywa.com.au/donate.
And that's our weekly news and current affairs. We have the latest news on our website and social media pages.
Don't forget to join us next Wednesday for our final bulletin for 2020. Until then, from Sarah and myself, we wish you good health and good night.
Take care.